Stop the cap.
So this should be an interesting thought exercise, and you all can give your 2 cents on this. Let me make sure this thing is recording because I'm driving. So, Captain Solo and myself, we had a discussion, and usually like we'll be talking about something completely different, and then he'll think about it and then apply it to other areas, in terms of like how people are thinking, because Captain Solo thinks completely differently than a lot of people. And some of it has to do with, his childhood traumas, the fact that he didn't have a childhood, the fact that he was thrust into adulthood. Remember, his mother, got shot, 5 times when he was, 16 or 17. Then he went and joined the Marines, right? And so, he went through a whole bunch of just drama, adults not doing the right thing by him. So, like, his brain, is wired differently, just in the terms of like how people think about the world, and then even when it comes to him being light skinned, and how, especially in the, late 80s, early 90s, light skinned dudes were, it was, he's too pretty to do anything. He doesn't have skills. He's too pretty. He went through that very, ugly transition, and where it transitioned into, light-skinned dudes were gay, and light-skinned dudes were less masculine, and they were feminine, and, all that good stuff, right? So, Captain Solo is very much like about his business of, showing people and proving people, wrong about, what he can do. But the ugly reality is we live in a world where a lot of times people don't even respect that. Even going back to that video that I posted of that, what's his name, DBDR or something like that. I don't know, some white guy that we randomly found on YouTube that Captain Solo sent me, and basically making all the same talking points that I've made about how the white boomer generation has basically not only fucked over everybody, but fucked over their own kids. And the young white men are not driven, to go out there and do anything, because, the model that they were given by the boomers, by the, go out there, hard work, basically all the conservative talking points. That shit doesn't hold water. It's a carrot that it's a non-edible carrot that they've been holding over everybody's head, and the younger generations are recognizing that shit, you can't eat that shit, right? And nobody really values that, hard work. Like I've seen so many videos on TikTok and Instagram about, corporate America and the work environment, and, people going through like six layered interviews, not valuing people's time, acting like, people should just be thankful that they're working for a job. Or the classic one is that the hardest working person in the company doesn't get promoted, right? It's the lazy people that get promoted, the people that don't put in, the hard work, right? And people see that, right? So the rhetoric doesn't match the reality. And, there needs to be some, I don't know, some soul searching, some adjustment in society. But again, when you got money looming over everything, right, and people got mouths to feed and take care of their family, and, they don't really give a fuck, right? Then you just end up with like what you see on YouTube, which is a lot of the conversations that were just initially, designed or presented to try to come to some sort of resolution, have turned into one big fat grift, right? Keep it going, keep the gender war going, keep everything going, keep all the problems going, because problems, drama, people click in, views, all that other stuff, so that they, can generate money. I mean, this is the whole thing that Fresh and Fit ran into, that whole having to ante up or raise, the next level of whatever is going to get clicks and views, right? So basically, that is what the world has turned into. right? Here comes the religious people. See, we told you that money is the root of evil, right? All that, right? But anyway, so I personally take issue when, the black women and divestors jump up online and they want to sit there and they want to talk about, how not generous black men are. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Like they try to make like this blanket statement about black men and their generosity, and say that black men are inherently different than other men when it comes to their generosity. And it reminds me of what I say about, the parents that, you got, like, let's say you got a broke dad. He doesn't have any money, and he'll sit there and hide behind some sort of moral lesson. He's broke. He can't really do much for his kids. Probably shouldn't have had kids in the first place until he got his shit together. And he'll sit there and he'll say, I'm teaching you a valuable lesson about money. That's why, I don't just spoil my kids. Nah, motherfucker, you can't spoil your kids. You couldn't spoil them if you wanted to, because you don't got it like that, right? Versus the one that actually has it like that, but says he doesn't want to spoil his kids, right? Like the Bill Gates or the Warren Buffetts of the world, right? That are like, I'm not just giving you everything because, that's just going to make you, a lazy bum or whatever, right? Not that I agree with that sentiment. I'm just saying, right, coming from them, it makes way more sense than coming from the person that's broke that really can't offer anything to begin with. But then they'll hide behind, I'm teaching a valuable lesson about the dollar. It's bullshit, right? And, the same thing applies to, like, men that are broke and dating and stuff like that. Like, how much of him not offering you or giving you whatever X, Y, and Z, how much of that is tied to what he's incapable of doing versus what he's not willing to do? There's a difference there. Just because he's incapable of doing it right now doesn't mean that he's not willing to do that or wouldn't do that if he had it like that. And I do, hate when people assume that when a person can't do something that they won't do something. And I've had to, kind of check Captain Solo on that, even though he's hyper sensitive to, motherfuckers that can, like his father, who could have done a number of things because he worked at General Motors, but he didn't. He shut down because if he couldn't have the woman, he didn't want the child, right? So, Captain Solo is 100% right about that. However, when it comes to things that men can't do, I won't charge them with what they won't do. And I'll give you a primary example to highlight just how full of shit a lot of black women are, right? Black women will go out here and they'll deal with drug dealers and they'll deal with niggas in the streets. Why do they deal with them? Because they're stingy? No, they deal with them because they break bread, right? They deal with them because they got that fast money. And because they got that fast money, right, they spend it. They pop bottles. They don't care about getting a table or getting bottles. They don't care about, buying a chick a car or buying her some shit. Like, again, this is the whole thing with, when you have young black men that have all this delayed gratification, right? And the Meek Mills, they become a rapper, and the first thing they do is they buy the house and they buy the car, they buy their mama a house, they go out there and they spend all the money. We know that that's what black men do that come from poverty. The minute they get money, they spending that shit like it's running water. So there again, there's a difference between men who can't but would versus men who wouldn't. I don't see this model of men who wouldn't. I see more men who can't, which is why they don't. Right? So, anyway, that conversation morphed and evolved into a discussion about the inner city and repairing the black community. Right? And there's a lot of different aspects to this, right? Because the whole idea about repairing the black community is not to go in there and gentrify the neighborhood. That's not the idea, right? The idea is that it's supposed to be, people with resources and money move into an area and somehow change the culture by being there, which, that's bullshit. That's not going to work, because the only way you're going to change the culture of poverty is for people to be gainfully employed. If they're gainfully employed, now those men that everybody argues, doesn't do this or won't do that, now they actually have the means to do that. Just like, again, the drug dealers, when they go from broke to actually having money, they spending money like it's running water. Breaking bread over here, Ma Dukes, what you need, I got you. You know what I mean? Like, they feel good. Like, this notion that black men don't take pride in taking care of other people is bullshit. The issue primarily is the fact that a lot of them don't got it like that. That's the issue. But, again, I had to bring the same thing into the space, when it comes to black men building. I'm like, you don't know what to do. Like, first off, now let's go into skills, right? So a lot of black men don't have the skills, right? We can talk about deindustrialization. We can talk about the matriarchy. We can talk about Captain Solo's mama taking him out of karate class, and then, like black women do, run around and talk about, we're not defended, right? When the very skills that somebody would need to defend you, or the weapons that they would need to defend you, black women are totally against. I give them a bombastic side eye when it comes to that shit, right? But like, when it comes to the skills of building and maintaining, a community and all that, right? The men gotta have the skills. And what I talked about, like when I talked about, Cap was big on, how he was showing me these homes in Detroit where, like, people went back and they bought the McMansions and all that. And then he saw the video of, I don't know, the big muscular gay dude of down there in Atlanta, and the real estate guy. And, he's kind of funny with some of his shit, because he gets into some low-key anti-blackness, low vibrational shit himself. You know what I mean? Like, he gets into this, like, well, there ain't no white people there, so, I mean, the area just automatically got to be shit. So it's like this whole, anything and everything that white people touch is like fucking gold, right? You start getting into some real heavy coonery, right? But in any event, he made Cap reevaluate, because he brought up the whole thing about, like, you move into some of these areas and whatnot, you buy in those areas, you better have somebody staying in that house 24/7, because they will be plotting on you. They will be looking, oh, look, his car's not here. And they will break into that shit and steal shit out of that house. That's what they're going to do. He was like, the surrounding area matters. The whole notion of going in there and one-man army in it, and if you one by one, the men show up and you could turn the neighborhood around. Like, again, Cap, a lot of times he thinks as basically what he is, which is a single childless man, which he's been in his entire life. So for him to go in there, in an area that's pretty bad, that's nothing for him. But when you start talking about men with families and shit like that, that's not the case. And again, like we talked about, white people don't go in there. When they gentrify an area, they send the artisans, the gays, the freaking students, what do you want to call it? What's the other group? The hipsters, right? These are who they send in there, right? They're the ones that get fucked up by crime. Just like in that documentary, that 2005 documentary, Flag Wars, right? Where the gay dude got hit with the rock, right? They send them in first. Then after they go in, then, you'll see the white man move his family in after all the undesirables have been pushed out and priced out, right? And the neighborhood is now demographically white, but then eventually they're going to price out all of those students and bohemians and hipsters and, all those white people that are, that don't have families and not a part of the, white patriarchal structure, right? And then eventually you'll see white women walking around with their fucking poodles, white women jogging with their headphones in and everything. That's how you know that a neighborhood, has transitioned from being a blighted area to a nicer area, right? But again, white men don't send in their families first. No, they send in all the childless white people, young people, the demographics that they don't give a fuck about that are in the white community, right? Going back to like Dave Chappelle and that whole conversation about the LGBT community car and who gets to sit in the front and who's sitting in the back. Like there's rankings and hierarchies within the white community. Don't think that the white community is like like they're all the same. No, class and all that other shit is definitely a part of the equation. But the question that came up is like, how many people or black men specifically, like when it comes to fixing up the community, there's certain things that they don't do because they don't have the skills. Like one of the things that blows Captain Solo's mind, and this is the educated black people mindset. Most black people who like have this sort of bougie ass mindset can follow me on this. And that is you go to college, you get the career, you make the money, and then you hire somebody else, right? You hire some Mexicans to come in and fix some shit up. You don't know how to do it. You don't have the skills, right? Like I gave Captain Solo an example. I was like, look, man, there's so many, like, you know how many fucking cars, like even like you can get a supercar for like literally less than half the price. And what you can do, and you can see it on YouTube, these guys that go and they buy these cars, they spend like $100,000 on a car that's worth like $400,000, like a smashed up Rolls Royce. Go get the parts and they fix it themselves, right? We all know that the majority of what you're going to pay for, if you get somebody else to work on a vehicle for you to repair it, is the labor, right? So if you knew how to do it yourself, right, you could fix some shit up yourself, and people are like, man, how does he afford that? And it's like, yeah, blood, sweat, and tears, motherfucker. Like, yeah, if you knew how to do some shit, if you knew how to lay some shit out, like even for me, right? Like a couple years back, I learned how to build AR-15s, right? And I got a couple of people that they're like, first it started out like, oh, that shit's fire, man. That's better than my basic ass M&P Sport. Oh, that shit's fire, man. Man, make me one, man. I'll buy the parts, man. Make me one, man. You know what I mean? And like, or they want me to give them a price and then make them a rifle, right? Because they don't know like what it is. All they know is they see like a gold bolt carrier and they're like, yeah, I want my shit to look like that. That's all they say. And this is the rhetoric of people who don't have skills. Right? They don't even know. They're like, I just want my shit to look like that. I don't know how that you got it like that, but I want my shit to look like that. You know what I mean? Oh yeah. I want like that type of scope. Oh yeah. I want it to look like that. Oh, I didn't even know you could do some shit like that. Oh, how come your foregrip or your pistol grip, how come it's angled differently? Because they got different angles on pistol grips. Oh man, I ain't know that. Like there's a lot of shit that dudes don't know. The stocks, all that stuff, the slings, the light, you know what I mean? Or they'll get freaked out, like I said, like those Surefire lights that are like $300-$400. And I'm like, go on fucking AliExpress and get a clone and call it a day, or get an Olight. You know what I mean? And so, to me, I look at some of these rifles that people will pay like $1,000 for. I'm like, man, I could make that shit for like $550. I can make a better one for like $550. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care about, now granted, like certain parts, like you want an Aero Precision lower, like that's going to cost more. Aero Precision lowers are like anywhere from like $89 to like $115, something like that, right? Versus an Anderson lower, which you can get all day for like $40. But then they got some of these other manufacturers like Combat Armory, and they're like $50, $42. I think they're like $42, but they're billet. I like billet lower receivers. That's just me. They're a little bit heavier, but they're just beefier, and I like the beefierness, to it. Sometimes that can be a problem when you're trying to put something on it like a bad lever, and when it comes to the bolt catch, like sometimes it'll the tolerances, the space between it doesn't allow you to put something else on it because there's excess material. But that's a whole nother conversation. All I'm saying is I'm using that as an example that I'm familiar with of something that I know how to do because I have the skills to do it. And like right off top, I'm saving money and I don't even think about it. So when I go and I see somebody trying to sell somebody a bullshit basic ass rifle, yeah, I'm gonna need like $1,200 for that. I'm sitting there, I'm like, nigga, that shit ain't worth no goddamn $1,200. But again, that's because I have the skills, right? And the same thing applies to Captain Solo. Captain Solo got the skills. He goes and sees some shit. He sees something broken, and he's like, oh man, I could work with that. I could do something with that. Captain Solo will see a house that's dilapidated and broke down and stuff like that. And he's like, as a single childless man, you know what I mean? That's looking at it like, I don't have any kids. I'm trying to live out my life. Yeah, that'll keep me busy for like 6 months. That's how he looks at shit. That'll keep me busy for like 6 months. Shit to do, shit to, to like look forward as goals. And I'm not saying everybody has the same situation as Captain Solo, but he's asking the question of like, where is that drive, in black men? And even when it comes to like the community, I mean, he's got to throw that question right back at women. And where did you think that you were going to live, when it comes to all these repairs that need to be made in the community? Was this really a busy assignment? Or is it the fact that you just like the men that don't have the skills to fix it, you can't even envision the shit. You can't even envision it being repaired. So it'll never be good enough because you can't even envision it. Because that at that point, that really is a busy assignment. But I do feel Captain Solo on the whole, it is pretty shitty about the fact that we don't have the skills. Like there was some video on TikTok of some brother and he was talking about how there was a abandoned house that was right next door to him. And he said somebody had bought the house. He said some Mexicans pulled up in some trucks with a whole bunch of materials, drywall, all that shit. He said them motherfuckers was making noise. They banged that shit out. And by the next day, they turned that bitch into a home. He's like, they just banged it out all night and turned that shit into a home. And they were out there with the Modelos. They love Modelos. Mexicans don't drink Corona. They do not drink Corona. They fuck with Modelo, and they fuck with Modelo heavy. They don't drink Dos Equis. They don't drink Corona. They drink Modelo. You will see boxes and boxes and boxes of Modelo everywhere, when it comes to this. That's what they fuck with. So that's the funny part. Like, it's like, I don't know if Budweiser or any of the freaking, the drinks elsewhere are whether they're what American alcohol is like. What you UK people, is there any American beer that y'all act like is the shit, but over here we look at it and we're like, just start naming shit and I'll tell you whether we think that shit is fire or not. You know what I mean? Because generally speaking, I can't think of any American beer. I will say freaking Michelob. Is it Michelob? I think it's Michelob Gold. That shit is fire. I like my my Pilsners, but that's a whole nother discussion. Anyway, I'm saying, why did I go off track? I went off track talking about the shit. But anyway, going back to what Captain Solo was saying about, the community and the community actually being repaired and people building. Like, number one, we have a problem with a lot of people don't have the skills. Number two, a lot of the mindset is, to go in there. If you're going to go in there, you're paying somebody else to fix it up. Then there's another mindset where people have this idea where they fix it up, but they're not going to live there, right? Then there's another mindset of where people want to start anew and start from scratch. Like elsewhere, they're like, oh, the black community is done. People have a mindset in that environment, yada, yada, yada. You can't do it, right? But like, other than Atlanta, I don't see where black people are like, they point to a plot of land and they're like, that is where we will start Wakanda. Like, I don't see that shit, right? And then there's the whole notion of fixing the black community is really an abstraction, where essentially the idea is to get more black people gainfully employed, get money in people's hands, or educated people, and then it would just organically change on its own, right? There's that idea. But we know that that's not what happens. What ends up happening is the black people who have the knowledge and the resources and everything, they leave. And truth be told, they gotta leave. You already know if the drug dealers are leaving, if the fucking, if Ice Cube gotta leave and all these other people that were in the streets, right? Because we see what happens, Young Dolph, we see what happens, Nipsey Hussle, when cats don't leave. You know what I mean? Not to say that they would be out there fucking with lames the same way that they fuck with street dudes that got, work in the streets and all that other stuff. But I'm just saying, a lot of those guys, they're not built like that. They're not built for that environment. They're not. So, it's like they leave. And if they leave, obviously it's a brain drain, and then nobody's in that environment, right? And then there's no example of bettering oneself in that environment, and then it just basically becomes this self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating prophecy of, black people in poverty and having a culture of poverty, right? But I'm saying, was the concepts or the arguments made about fixing the black community, was that real, or was that just an abstraction? Because at the end of the day, people are going to have to live there. I got into it with some of the some top key people in the city of Philadelphia about that. Where they were like acting like, they were coming into the inner city, giving the children some words of encouragement, and then they were like, okay, little nigga, my work here is done. Up and away. And then they would just like kind of like Superman out of the community, and I'll be back next week, little kids, right? And I'm like, I was trying to explain to them, I'm like, at this point, you're nothing but an example of people leaving. Like, that's what you're an example of. You're an example of people leaving. You're not an example of people staying there, fixing up the community, all that other stuff. You're not an example of that. The only person in Philadelphia that I would say is a prominent Philadelphian individual that actually stayed in, the community, is Kenny Gamble. That's the only one. I don't know anybody else that literally lives in the community, where people can see, touch, taste and smell them. I don't know anybody that got money like that was actually living, in the community. But that's a problem. Show me the Asian communities without Asian leaders in it. Show go down there on 10th and what street is that? Like 10th and Vine. Go down there on 10th and Vine in Chinatown and tell me about, or 10th and what would that be? Is it Arch Street? What street is that? I can't think of what street that is. Yeah, it should be 10th and Arch. Anyway, go down there in the middle of Chinatown and show me where there's no Chinese leaders in it. Show me in a Jewish community where there's no Jewish leaders living in the community. You know what I mean? Show me an Italian community, you know what I mean? Where there's no Italian leaders in it. I mean, that's the whole basis of the movie A Bronx Tale. You know what I mean? Now you can't leave. You know what I'm saying? Like, show me where that's going on. We don't have that. We really don't have that, where like it's like, and not only that, to a point where people feel safe in that environment. At the end of the day, there will have to be a war, and there will have to be bloodshed between black people trying to establish a nice, safe community and Ray Ray and Pookie. That day will come. So, all y'all, we don't believe in guns in the 2A, this other shit, all y'all bitch ass Christians and shit, you know what I mean? Y'all gonna have to face that fact. Yes, we need economic opportunities and jobs for these young men and all that other stuff. But again, you're gonna have to put certain people in the community that have embraced street culture, you're gonna have to put them in the dirt. You're gonna have to push their wig back. right? You're going to have law enforcement, the DA, the police, and everybody else. They're going to have to be on your side. They're going to have to be in your back pocket, right? You might have to do some corrupt shit here and there to where the police officer shows up and knocks on your door, and, acts like that cop when he was talking to John Wick. Hey, John, what's going on? Oh, hey, how you doing? Sees the dead body on the floor. I didn't see nothing, John. Okay. Looks like you're back at work. You know what I mean? Closes the motherfucking door, goes about his motherfucking business. Oh, yeah, you would need shit like that. But I already know a lot of black folks in the black community, they ain't built like that. And I think to a great degree, that was one of the things that helped maintain the black community, back in the day, coming back from World War II. Because, yeah, there were gangsters and there were street dudes and everything, but eventually the street dudes took over. But there was a point in time where these black men that came back, when they came back from World War II, World War I, World War II, and the Korean War, you know what I mean? Like, these men, you talking about hardened soldiers. You talking about warriors, real warriors. Men who have killed people on the battlefields of France and Germany, right? That's what you're dealing with. In Korea. But when it came to Vietnam, the problem with Vietnam, the average age, for soldiers in, I think, World War II was like 26. When you got to Vietnam, they were 19. They were kids. And a lot of them, they didn't know what they were doing there. They got involved in drugs. And then, there was that whole aspect, again, the PTSD, Rambo, and the way that, they were called baby killers and shit on. I think that is kind of what shifted a lot of the stuff in terms of veterans in the black community keeping shit in check. Them coming back to, a deindustrialized America. Again, more that, what movie was that? Freaking Dead Presidents. You know what I mean? Like, if you watch that scene in Dead Presidents with Juanita and how she was fucking with the drug dealer, and this dude was a veteran and he was getting punked by the motherfucking drug dealer and he had no money. So I think there was a huge shift in what happened with the, veterans and the respect that they had in the community. I don't know the specifics of why. I wasn't alive back then. I'm just saying, maybe somebody could give some insight on that who was alive back then. Like, what happened? Like, when you look at shit like the Deacons of Defense and everything, all those guys were soldiers. They were veterans. You know what I mean? And even the white guys knew, yeah, it ain't the one you want to fuck with, because that rifle he's got, he knows how to use that shit. That's not the one you want to fuck with. You know what I mean? So, now, you got 14-year-olds that know more about guns than the old heads. And then somebody did point out, they were like, talking about the Gen Xers. They were like, nah, we was, we had that shit, talking about, guys in the 90s. Remember, it was assault weapons ban. Yeah, I'll give you guys that. The guys that were in the, that were coming up in the 90s. Yeah, y'all had Uzis and AKs and all that. Semi-automatic pistols, Smith & Wessons and shit. Berettas. Y'all had that. You see that in Menace to Society. You know what I mean? They weren't out there with their J-frame revolvers. That's a generation a little bit earlier, more back to like the 70s, where, semi-automatic, they would have probably a Browning high power or 1911. But in terms of, Glocks with 33 round magazines or 32 round magazines, like, nah, they didn't have no shit like that. You know what I mean? Now you got guys talking about pull up with a stick. So, it's a different dynamic. But I'm saying, between the opportunities that would need to be created, the men that would have to live in the community, the skills that the men would need to have, which I think is a big part of that's a big part of the problem, because, the fact is we don't have the skills. This goes back to Vicente Fox when he, made the argument about hardworking Mexicans basically doing the jobs that even black Americans don't want to do. And a lot of people called him out on that as, that being racist. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, we did go from a population of slaves that did have the skills. Because remember, white people wasn't damn sure going to do the work and all their laziness. Get some slaves to do it, right? And black people had those skills all the way up until probably until the World War II. And then after World War II, America became a very industrious nation, and black men became more reliant on jobs as opposed to the type of work that you would do, building a barn or building a house or those sorts of things. Then you throw in the unionization of construction workers, right? And then that became where white men were making damn good money. So then we can't let black people they work those jobs because they were the the work mules, right? But then after a while it shifted over. Then like you had stuff like all that stuff that you see with the Irishmen working on doing the steel. I think they were Irish, the guys that were working up and building Manhattan and stuff like that, walking on the skyscrapers and stuff like that. I didn't see any. Were there any black men that were involved in that? Because you don't see them in any of the pictures, and you know how they did us back then. I mean, even with Teddy Roosevelt and the fucking his Rough Riders and shit like that, like they literally intentionally cut the Buffalo Soldiers out of the photos. They got like a picture that actually has, you can see him, brothers all the way on the right hand side. You can see one of the brothers, that he's clearly a black man. And you can see him all the way on the right hand side. Man, they cropped that picture so fast it's not even funny. And got Teddy Roosevelt with what looks like a football team of dudes around him. And I'm like, that picture is way bigger than that. Like that picture, like they actually turned that picture in like a big like horseshoe like U shape. This is way bigger than what the original picture was. But that's how they did us. You know what I mean? So I guess overall, like, just something to think about. Like, again, was the idea of fixing the black community, was it something real that people were going to move in there and build some shit and slowly over time, people would just keep moving in? Because there's other problems with that. People move in, let's just say the banks were to give them the renovation and all that, the money for the renovation, and they move in and they build up and everything. Then the property taxes go up, and then you price out the people that were already living there out. That presents as a problem. The other thing that is an issue is going into the black community and fixing it up with the way that redlining and all that shit work. These would not be environments that would appreciate like they do if you lived in a predominantly white community. And this is a whole problem with black people and them living in their own communities because of that. Again, that the whole historical context of redlining and the racism that's baked into that. Like that guy said in that documentary, America had an opportunity to fix everything, where they could have been like, okay, we're going to build these houses for these soldiers coming back. These communities have to be at least 13% African American. All of them have to be 13% African American. They have to be mixed. This is what we're doing. And then black people would have been able to participate in the appraisal of homes, because the whole neighborhoods being mixed neighborhoods would have been baked into the system. But they didn't do that, and they failed. And so now we have all these racial problems that we have to deal with, in large part tied directly to the fact that we don't live anywhere near each other, right? This was the whole thing with the whole busing, where we go to school together. I think busing helped. I wouldn't say that busing didn't help with people knowing each other, but the fact that you don't live next to each other, that shit breaks ties and connections, whatever connections are made. I mean, I don't talk to, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, and I don't talk to the majority of the white kids that I grew up with. They don't hit me up like, hey, let's break bread together. Like, no. You know what I mean? So, I mean, if you're gonna quote unquote integrate, like, you're gonna have to do that shit on more levels than one. But they didn't do that. I mean, I'm so glad I found that documentary with that. I mean, he said it right in there. It was an old white man. He got nothing but gray hair. He said we had an opportunity, to fix this shit, and we blew it. Right? He blew it. With the whole urban renewal and 1955 Highway Commission Act and all that stuff, and then they had the racial housing covenants and redlining. They fucked it up. And it's nonsense white people talk today, where they expect, black people to think and behave like white people, and they don't have access to the resources, they don't have access to capital, they don't have access to the equity, built into these homes. They weren't able to partake. This is why black people are talking about, reparations, not just for slavery, but for Jim Crow and all of the economic policies directed against the African American community. See, they can't argue with that. They can try to play the game. Oh, well, I mean, the Africans sold themselves into slavery. They don't want to talk about gunboat diplomacy. They don't want to talk about the African kings that fought back and then they killed them and then replaced them, with the sellouts and shit like that. They don't talk about that. But see, if you stick right to Jim Crow, they got nowhere to go. Because again, the reparations are for the unjust policies that the federal government put in place, which marginalized black people. So you can't run away from that. These were policies that were put in place right here on American soil. See, they can't run from that. So, that's the conversation that needs to be had, when it comes to reparations. But, in terms of, these it's fixing the black community. Yeah. One big thing that I cannot get around is the banks. The banks and the banks and the realtors and the people that do the appraisals and shit. We've already seen that crap where you get a black person, they go and they get appraisal, they get lowballed, they remove all the pictures from their house, go get their a white person to act like they own the house, and all of a sudden the price of their house goes up like $100,000 or more. We've already seen that. You know what I mean? Like, that is theft. You know what I mean? Again, not only do the banks and the institutions owe black people reparations, but the Realtors Association of America owes black people reparations. See, they recently came out with an apology. No, nigga, not an apology. You're gonna have to come up off that shmoney. You're gonna have to come up off that shmoney. Cut the check. You see? And see, they'll be quick to dissolve themselves, file for bankruptcy. Oh, we don't have it like that. Oh, no. This shit needs to be corrected. So anyway, just some shit to think about, people and, especially black men, generosity versus a dude that can't versus a dude that won't. A dude that can't because he doesn't have it like that. And I understand it plays out to be the same thing. It's the same thing. Right? A dude that can't and a dude that won't, at the end of the day, it equates to the same thing, that the person is not going to get anything or receive anything from them. I get that. But to charge somebody with the crime of what they won't do when they can't do it, that shouldn't be done. Those are two different things. Because what you're accusing the person of is you're accusing the person of being heartless, or you're accusing the person of being selfish and all that when they're not. You know what I mean? Like even when it comes to white people are way more generous when white people are doing good. Oh, when white people are doing good, white people are like, oh, you poor little Negroes. Oh, let me give you some crumbs so I can feel better about myself. Oh, yes, here you go, you little Negroes. Oh, yes. I'm so generous. Oh, do you know that I helped some Negroes today, right? That's white people. When shit is good, that's white people. When shit is bad, blah, 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 we don't know nothing. My family came here from Ireland, and when they came here, they were indentured servants. Do you know? Do you know that they were indentured servants? They didn't have anything. The Irish were oppressed when they first came here, right? That's white people when they're struggling and shit. That's what you're going to hear from them. It's about hard-working personal responsibility, right? That's what they say. When they living good and eating good and everything's good, that's what they say. But when they're struggling, you know what I mean? Nah, nigga, we ain't got nothing for you. So anyway, something to think about. That's my video. SWP out. Don't forget to comment, share, like, and subscribe.